January the 25th of 2023 was Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine's 45th birthday, and he got a big birthday present. A number of countries, including Canada, promised to deliver to him modern main battle tanks, in Canada's case, Leopard 2s. So today on Don't Talk TV, we'll take a bit of a look at what some of the legal implications of this escalation of NATO involvement in the war in the Ukraine might have. Hello, my name's Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So for a number of months now, President Zelenskyy and the Ukrainian government have been demanding from Western countries that they give them their most up-to-date modern battle tanks to assist in the war against the Ukraine. I've talked about the war in Ukraine on a couple of occasions in previous episodes, but this is certainly taking things to the next level. Canada's contribution is that we are going to send 4 combat-ready Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine in the coming weeks, and this was announced just on January the 26th of 2023. And this CBC article says that Canada will supply Ukraine with 4 Leopard 2 A4 main battle tanks and Canadian Armed Forces trainers to teach Ukrainian soldiers how to operate the vehicles, Defense Minister Anita Anand announced Thursday. And she says the reason we're giving these to them is that these heavily armored and highly protective vehicles provide soldiers with a tactical advantage on the battlefield thanks to their excellent mobility, their firepower, and their survivability. And these tanks will allow the Ukraine to liberate even more of its territory and defend its people from Russia's brutal invasion. Now, I'm not really sure how much help 4 tanks is going to be in a war. I mean, 4 tanks is not even a company of tanks. The United States is sending 31, which is the equivalent of a battalion worth of tanks, and other countries are sending some more. It seems there'll be something in the vicinity of 300. The military usefulness of 300 tanks in a full-scale war could be debated. We don't have time to do that on this channel, as interesting as that might be. But I think this, as I've said earlier, this takes things to a new level of involvement by NATO. The Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Lavrov, has described this as a proxy war. To me, that seems to be an accurate description of the situation. This isn't a lot different from, say, the war in Vietnam, where the United States was actually having troops on the ground, but the Soviet Union and China were supplying weapons and supplies to the Viet Cong, similar to how NATO is providing weapons and supplies to the Ukraine. But now we're getting to the point where we're sending main battle tanks. And I think others agree that we are waging war on Russia. The German foreign minister had this to say at a recent presentation at the Council of Europe.
Ukraine needs more military support, but not only by one country like mine or the US, by all of us. We can fight this war only together.
So, in my view, we're essentially at war with Russia. Now, there's no legal definition of war, and unlike the United States, in Canada, there's no requirement that Parliament declare war or approve a declaration of war. This is something that can be done by the Governor and Council, similar to the Emergencies Act. And the Emergencies Act is what would usually be used in a war to give the government the powers that it wants to have. And we'll look at that in a minute. But in terms of the ability to declare war, before 1931, Canada would have war declared for it by Britain. Because we were still part of the British Empire, we didn't have the ability to declare war on our own until the Statute of Westminster in 1931. So just to take a really quick look at this act, what it did here in Section 2 sub 2 said that no law, no provision of any law made after the commencements of this act by the Parliament of a Dominion, and it defines a Dominion as all these various colonies that this applies to, including Canada, that none of their acts will be void or inoperative on the ground that it is repugnant to the law of England. So there's that independence of our lawmaking from England. We don't have to be in line with their law anymore. And then in paragraph 3, it is hereby declared and enacted that the Parliament of a Dominion has full power to make laws having extra to territorial operation. So that would certainly include wars being fought in foreign countries. Now, the only time Canada's ever declared war was actually in World War II. They declared war in a few different stages, first against Germany in 1939, and other countries as the war progressed, and other countries were involved. Lesser Axis powers had war declared against them. But there have been a number of wars that we've been involved in where war was not declared. The Korean War, most recently the war in Afghanistan, no declaration of war, yet clearly we were at war, sending troops over into the combat zones. Now, I did mention the Emergencies Act, so this is another thing that can come into play when things start getting really serious in terms of a war. So Part 4 of the Emergencies Act is the one that deals with a war emergency. And a war emergency is defined as war or other armed conflict, real or imminent, involving Canada or any of its allies that is so serious as to be a national emergency. Now again, considering what our government considers a national emergency, I think the bar is pretty low for what would be considered a war emergency. And again, certainly there's armed conflict going on, and it's not even imminent, it's real in the Ukraine, and it involves Canada. I mean, we're sending our battle tanks there. It's involving us. Now, to make a declaration of war emergency, the Governing Council, when they believe, on reasonable grounds, that a war emergency exists, and necessitates the taking of special temporary measures for dealing with emergency, they shall, after consultation required by Section 44, may by proclamation so declare. So it's interesting, we'll look at Section 44 in a second. There's actually a bit more requirement to a declaration of emergency when it's a war emergency versus other type of emergencies, as we've seen before. But again, it's the Governing Council, in other words, the Prime Minister, telling the Governor General what their opinion should be. Now, it's interesting that unlike the other emergencies under the Emergencies Act, it's not specified what temporary measures can be implemented to deal with it. So in other words, the government gets a carte blanche to do whatever they deem necessary, or almost carte blanche, because Section 40 does prohibit the Governor and Council from doing conscription by regulation as one of their powers. So that's interesting. Conscription still actually has to be done by Parliament. And then the Section 44 I alluded to says that the Governor and Council, before they issue their proclamation, they must consult the Lieutenant Governor and Council of each province. Now, consulted doesn't mean they have to actually listen to them. So all power is in the hands of the Prime Minister, and we've discussed some of the difficulties and potential problems that I see that in the past. But I think we can see from Canadian law, again, very different from American law, there's no specific definition of war. There's no requirement that Parliament declare war. The United States, it's required that Congress declare war, although that doesn't seem to hold them back from engaging in wars and warlike behavior anyway. I thought it was interesting to look into this, given the escalating involvement that we have in the war in the Ukraine. I think it bears repeating that it's highly concerning that this war is being waged on behalf of a criminally corrupt regime, one of the most corrupt regimes in the world. I've covered in previous episodes how Volodymyr Zelensky's government came to power and some of the other things that concern me that are going on in the Ukraine, but it's worth keeping in mind what just happened this week as well, aside from Mr. Zelensky's birthday, is this corruption scandal where he's fired a large portion of his government. This is an article from the New York Times. Ukrainian corruption scandal stokes long-standing aid concerns in U.S. So here they say, the ouster of several top officials from Ukraine's government on Tuesday following accusations of government corruption has lent those concerns a fresh urgency, that being concerns over where this money is going and what's happening to it. Although U.S. and European officials say there is no evidence that aid to Ukraine was stolen, even the perception of fraud would threaten political support for continued wartime assistance and for the post-war reconstruction effort that Western officials envision. So the allegations include reports Ukraine's military had agreed to pay inflated prices for food meant for its troops. A deputy prosecutor general was fired for borrowing an oligarch's Mercedes to go on a vacation to Spain. And a presidential aide commandeered a Chevrolet Tahoe that had been donated to help with evacuations. And this episode, of course, is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. You can call another lawyer or myself. My phone number and website are listed below. If there's topics you'd like to see me cover, please send us a suggestion to the email address listed below, or leave a comment in the comments box, and we'll do our best to accommodate your request. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.